The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. Austin FC picked 3 potential new players in the MLS SuperDraft, and we're going to tell you all about them and how they might or might not fit into the team. The Johan Valencia signing was made official, so we'll hypothesize about where he best fits into the Austin FC midfield. And Sam Stejskal of The Athletic also joins us for a chat about how recent Austin FC moves might affect the salary budget this season. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I am relishing in the fact that 3 years ago, we went to the Rustic Tap and had a really, really long day that seemed like it went until 3 o'clock in the morning. It actually went till like 9 at night.
Why were we at the Rustic Tap, Jeremiah, for those who don't know?
It was just because we're
just like hanging out on 6th
downtown
Street.
all day long, yeah. Yeah, so we just passed a few days ago the 3rd anniversary of Austin FC Day, which was the day that Don Garber and Alexi Lawless came to town, and Austin FC was officially announced as the 27th Major League Soccer franchise. And I think you said you were playing a drum and lost your hearing next to Faris and the Bombo. You want to tell that story from that day?
Yeah, so that was like the initial seed of what became La Murga de Austin was me playing a snare drum and Faris, who is still very involved with the Murga, playing a bombo with the platillo. That's like the big bass drum that has a little hand symbol on the top of it. And I was like, I've played in bands and stuff. Like 2 drums should be okay, like in this big open space. I think my ears will be okay. I think I can handle it. And with Faris standing like right next to me with the platillo, like the little symbol, just right in my ear for like 6 hours. And the next day I was like, I think I have permanent hearing damage. Like, this is not good. And it was ringing for several days afterwards. It finally went away and I think it's okay. But I was like legitimately nervous for a few days that was never going to stop. But overall, that day was amazing. I think we got downtown at like 2 to kind of prepare for like the little march into the thing, and stood in an alley for an inexplicable amount of time.
Yeah, way longer than we should have.
But went in, and like tons of people came in and were very excited. And that was, we talk about these landmarks when we kind of realize like, oh, this is going to be big. Like, people care about this or are going to care about this. And that was one of those, like, so many people at that venue that like a lot of the events were these smaller things where you had to kind of be really into what was going on to know about it. And we kind of saw the same people over and over. And there we saw lots of new people and met lots of new people. And that was one of those landmarks. But overall, an amazing day. And like, I saw you online talking about how you got home and you thought it was super late, and it was not at all.
Yeah, it was 10. Yeah, I thought we'd stayed out all day long. And my wife's like watching TV. I'm like, why are you awake? And she's like, because it's 10 o'clock at night and you've been out all day. And I think one of my other favorite things from that day was the look on Don Garber's face when people started chanting "Take our money" at him, like early on in the announcements. And it's like, I think that was probably the moment for Don Garber when he decided that they had really nailed it in terms of making Austin a franchise.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy how we had Andy on last week, and after we like stopped recording, or maybe before we started, one or the other, we're asking, like, me and Andy were trying to figure out if we had ever actually spoken in person. I think that was the day, because he was talking to Adam Butler and I just kind of barged in and introduced myself. But yeah, amazing day. And it's led to an even more amazing last 3 years? How long was that? That was 3 years ago. Yeah. Crazy. It seems like yesterday and a decade ago at the same time. But yeah, glad we're here rather than there at this point.
Yeah, and that's exactly what was my take was going to be on it. Is like a lot of those memories are super vivid, and then some of those things just seem like such a distant past. And it's a great step along the way. But I'm very happy to have a team to talk about and a season that's only a few weeks away. Now to talk about one other thing that we wanted to do. If you didn't check out Stateside Soccer Show last week, we did 2 shows last week, so we had the chance to talk to those guys Probably looks super weird on video. I haven't gone back and watched that. Have you watched the video?
I just saw some of the
on
clips
YouTube?
that they played, but yeah, we are not used to. We essentially use the video when we record this show to just like have more like chemistry with each other when we're talking. But it also allows us to just like space out or be staring at a screen or like pick our nose or whatever whenever we're not, because we know nobody's ever going to see this video. Not the case with the Stateside Soccer Show. They actually released that video and people see it, which we're going to have to get better at if we ever do any camera stuff.
Yeah, I think so. So I'll put that in the show notes on the Striker Texas website if you didn't get the chance to check it out. So you can see us. I think I described it as the 1 hour version of the 100 hours we've spent podcasting. So I don't think we break anything terribly new, but it's a pretty good overview of sort of the whole journey.
Yeah. All right. So we mentioned Austin FC added 3 new picks through the MLS SuperDraft. So we thought it'd be cool to just kind of go through all 3 of those picks and do a little scouting report on each of them. So we'll kind of do this out of order for the sake of narrative.
Did you put these in alphabetical order? Is that the reason that you?
I don't really know. It's the order in which I watched the videos.
Okay.
For some reason, I don't know. So we're gonna start with the second round draft pick.
Okay, so you watch the videos, so I'll give like the general biographical information about the player. How about that?
Okay,
and
sounds
we'll go
good.
from there. So yes, defender Charlie Asensio played 4 seasons at Clemson University, recorded 9 assists and 82 career appearances. Played the men's national soccer championship game in 2021. Assisted on the second goal of the match. He's a 21-year-old senior left back, which is a position of need. And Landon, you have watched video of him and have an opinion on him. And I think it's pretty good, too, from what I've heard.
Yeah, so there was a like a highlight video on YouTube that made him look like a superstar. And that kind of got me excited. Looking into more video and not just the highlights, I'm slightly less high on him than I was from just the YouTube highlight clip. He seems like he's not bad by any means. He does have a really good cross, and that was some of the stuff that was in that highlight video was some really nice crosses. Other than that, I don't know that he's such a different player from Aiden Stanley, who we just released from the roster. And I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be much better, if any better, than Aiden Stanley. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that I am. So I would honestly be pretty nervous about him having to play significant minutes this year. We have some flexibility with that, right? Because Nick Lima has played quite a bit of left back. Hector Jimenez has played left back. So we have between our 3 starting caliber fullbacks, Lima, Jimenez, and Kolmanich, we have some flexibility there. So we wouldn't necessarily, even though he would be second in the depth chart at left back, he wouldn't necessarily have to play if one of those guys was unavailable. That being said, I'm like, we'll talk about camp here in a little bit, but these guys are all going to go into training camp and have to earn their spot. So Kip Keller is the only one who's guaranteed a contract. Charlie Asensio and Michael Knapp are essentially going to have the opportunity to earn a contract during preseason camp. I hope Charlie Asensio comes in and goes lights out and earns that spot and is good enough, but I'm not 100% confident that he is good enough to be that. And so there will be some other trialists in this camp, and I imagine there will be someone at this left back spot. I would be surprised if there weren't someone at this left back spot fighting with Charlie Asensio for that spot.
Were there particular parts of his game that stretch you out after watching more video as opposed to the highlights? Like, are there things that the highlight video covered up in particular, or was it just like your general sense of him as a player?
It was nothing bad. Like, I didn't see anything bad. Like, one-on-one defending, I think, could probably be a bit better. But it wasn't anything bad. It just wasn't anything overly good either.
Wasn't anything good? Okay.
And so like he wasn't amazing on the ball, like made some pretty like simple passing mistakes in the footage that I saw. And then also like wasn't a lockdown defender. And so you would hope that if they're going to be not great at one of those things, they would be really good at the other. And it didn't come across to me as that way, which is why I compare him to Aiden Stanley, because Aiden Stanley seemed to be like just okay at everything, but wasn't really good at any one thing. And that's kind of why I compare him to that. But like I said, hopefully he proves me wrong.
Yeah, we didn't talk about well, I don't remember if we talked about it on the show or not, but Aiden Stanley did find a home at Miami FC. So is that a USL team? Are they affiliated with Inter Miami at all or not? Or
I don't think they are affiliated with Inter Miami. I think they're completely separate ownerships. But yeah, I think that's a good level. Like Aiden Stanley had to play some spot minutes for Austin FC and didn't look bad, but never looked great. But I think USL is a good level for him, and I hope he does well there because I think he could do well in USL.
all right, well, let's go on to second round pick Michael Knapp, who has
Third round pick.
Third round pick. Oh, that's right, because we had one pick in each round this year.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the oddest journey of all the players that we acquired. So he was New York Red Bulls Academy 2017, 2018. Played 2 seasons at Montclair State University, where he appeared in 35 matches and tallied 3 goals and 7 assists. Then went back to Red Bulls as a member of Red Bulls 2. In 2021 was his first season as a professional. 22 games, 17 starts for the USL Championship. And then he's in the draft because
we looked this up
age.
last year, and I don't remember why.
So we've got a guy that played a whole bunch of minutes in USL last year who was not only available in the draft, but ended up slipping to the 3rd round, where Austin drafted him as a defensive midfielder. So did you watch any video on him?
I did watch a little bit, and it was with Red Bull 2. So it was his like USL minutes. I didn't watch a ton of video. He looked fine, like a decent kind of all around midfielder. I don't have a lot of hope for him getting a contract with Austin FC. And this has less to do with what I saw in the video I was watching and more to do with like historical statistics. In 2021, the only 2nd and 3rd round players that got contracts with an MLS club played with the USL partner of that MLS club, either their 2 team or some affiliate team. And there was a lot of them that got no contract at all and just went and were able to sign with whatever club they wanted to. So 3rd round picks historically do not make the team. And I wouldn't put money on Michael Knapp changing that narrative, because I didn't see anything that makes me think he is an obvious candidate to change that. Again, he's going to get his chance in camp. He did come to, like, we did see pictures of him at training camp, at preseason camp this week. So he'll get his shot to earn it. But again, I don't have a ton of confidence that he'll be on the team come February.
I think it's very fair. I don't think we need to count on him as being our second number 6 or anything like that for sure. So let's go on to the pick that so we're 0 for 2 on selecting Austin's first pick. And this year, at least we'd have some excuse for it, right? Because, I mean, last year it was the first pick, so it could have been anybody in the world. But yeah, Kippy Keller?
Yes.
21-year-old sophomore from St. Louis.
Apparently his dad is also named Kip. And so, like, among family, he's known as Kippy, which I think is wonderful.
It's adorable. I don't think we should latch on to that. But yeah, he was widely regarded as one of, if not the best prospect in the draft. 21-year-old sophomore from St. Louis University. So I'll go ahead and give Phil his line and say that this is the ton of Billikens draft. I think there were 4 taken in the first round.
And they had 3 Generation Adidas players, which is crazy for a school I've never heard of.
For sure. Yeah. So he made 49 appearances, 48 starts for St. Louis, 5 goals, 2 assists, Atlantic 10 Defensive Player of the Year, and first team All-Conference selection in 2021. Led them to an undefeated regular season. And this is the thing that is odd. Like, knowing how many people Generation Adidas and how many people they had picked early, I thought they would have been like runaway NCAA tournament champions, but they were the NCAA quarterfinals.
They lost to Washington, who also traditionally has a really good team.
Has a really good team. Yeah, home of Freddie Kleeman.
Exactly.
Everybody should know it too. Yep, Generation Adidas player. So I think he's probably the one that people know the most about. Are there any highlights of his game that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, before we do that, I want to just go back to how crazy it was that we got him at all. Because we said on the show, like clearly Kip Keller is the best fit for Austin FC, but there's no way he's going to be available because people were picking him to go number 1, like top 3 minimum. Like nobody expected him to fall past 3. And as I was watching when I should have been working during the super draft that day. It's like, oh my God, Kip Keller's still here at 2. He's still here at 3. And then we were watching the number 4 one, and they picked someone else. I don't remember who got picked at 4, but I was like, oh my God, we're gonna get Kip Keller. And then I was like, wait,
surely
are they gonna pick
Keller,
someone
right?
else? But then they got it, and I was over the moon. Just like it's we don't know if he's gonna be good, but it's center backs are this like domestic center backs are the safest bet you can get in the super draft. So much so that 8 of the 14 first picks in the super draft were center backs. And so over half of the top 15 there were center backs, which is crazy. But this guy looks the real deal. He's a big athletic frame. He actually played midfield in his youth career, but so before arriving to SLU, he was a midfielder, and they moved him to center back. And so the fact that he's only been playing center back for like 2 years and looks that good doing it is really impressive. But he's aggressive, agile. I wouldn't say like blazing speed, but for as big as he is, his speed is quite good. And also is really comfortable on the ball because of his experience playing midfield. So I think I've heard some people saying like, oh, we don't need to sign a center back now. Like we got this Keller kid, and I it's not quite that simple, right? Like I don't think we can expect this guy to be like a major contributor this season just because of college players need a little bit of time to kind of settle into this league and get up to the speed. And so I think at best we could maybe see some rotation minutes from Kip Keller this season, maybe fighting for like, if we do sign another big center back, maybe fighting for that 3rd spot with Romagna or Cascante, whoever gets left out of that starting lineup, if we do sign a big center back. But I think this is more of a prospect 1 year, 2 years in the future. That's when we could really start to expect Kip Keller to be a starter for this team.
Yeah, and that's the path that Walker Zimmerman was the best possible combination. I think followed that same thing, and then so the other guys like Tristan Blackman was a super draft pick who's been really successful as a defender, but it took a couple years. And I think who else I was trying to think? I think Richie Larrea is kind of the same way too. I mean, I think it's just it takes
Andrew Farrell for New England. I think it took him a few years to really kind of find his groove, but he was one of the better center backs in MLS this last year. So it does take some time sometimes.
I thought we didn't talk about the draft itself. You mentioned that, the audio video production was not amazing for many teams, and I was really worried when Austin came up. But Danny Pereira did a great job and had his mic on and all those things. And like Danny just looks like so happy, and I felt so good about seeing him do that. And in my head, even if Austin had sent in another pick, Danny was smart enough to know that Kip Keller was the pick. So even if Claudio had said something else, like Danny, who made that call, was going to make sure we brought Kip Keller to Austin.
Yeah, I like to believe that he would have. All right, so we kind of referenced a bit ago that so Kip Keller, this is worth mentioning. Kip Keller as a Generation Adidas player is guaranteed a contract. So by picking him, Austin FC is essentially saying, you have a contract with this team. I'm not sure how the money part of that works, if they still have to negotiate a salary, but he's guaranteed a contract this year. The other two are not, so they'll be fighting for a spot. And like I mentioned a bit before, there will be some other trialists in this camp that's starting now. We don't know who those guys are yet, but I would imagine there would be a defensive midfielder and a left back as trialists, if not some guys at other positions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did was went back and looked at how many minutes we got from our super draft players last year, all 3 of whom were first-round picks. And so we got 1,557 minutes from Pereira, which is that's kind of what you would hope for out of it. And then Aiden Stanley played 228 minutes, and Freddie Kleeman played 48. So, the lesson there is don't expect a lot of minutes from your super draft players. And the other guys, I think they were like, 3 more, and I can't even remember their names now.
Noah Lawrence was a goalkeeper who did not sign. Daniel Steedman is a guy who ended up in USL. And I think there was one more. maybe.
I think there was, but yeah. So that's just to know the kind of caliber you're getting in the lower rounds. And so Freddie Kleeman played the second least minutes of anybody on the team. This is probably kind of a no-brainer, but do you know who played the least minutes and how many minutes did he see?
Of draft picks?
No, of
Or
anybody.
Players
of anybody
on
the
team
roster
that wasn't injured.
Oh, well, they played more than one. Played one or more minutes.
Oh man.
Kleeman was 48. There was one guy that played less.
No, I don't know.
Owen Wolf in his 8 minutes over 2 games.
Oh, that's right. He did. He went in that Kansas
played,
City game, didn't he?
Yeah. He got two games of and played 8 total minutes. Yeah, and then the other guys were like Schoenfeld. The 3 guys was 0, right? It was I think Schoenfeld, Segura, and Pulisic. But yeah, Owen Wolf was the one person who played fewer minutes than Freddie.
I thought of Owen Wolf and I was like, he didn't actually play any MLS games, but he did get some minutes at the end of the season.
He did a little bit, at the very end of the year. To your point on other players in camp, if really a reason I wrote this note in is last year, Will Pulisic, Manny Perez, and Mackenzie Gaines all earned contracts as trialists. Do you feel like that was because they were really good, or because that was a function of how thin our roster was?
Yes.
Yes. Like I think we'll be if we sign 3 guys during the season who were trialists, I feel like we will be in some kind of trouble in 2022. Do you agree?
3 guys this offseason?
No, I mean say if we bring in 3 trialists like we did and they become like Austin FC players.
Oh,
mistakes will have been made.
I wouldn't be surprised if we signed 2 trialists before the beginning of the season.
You think so?
I wouldn't be surprised
for it
because we have 2 or 3 free spots depending on. So like if we're counting Keller, I believe that leaves us 3 supplemental roster spots to fill. And I think Asensio is on the fence there. I would bet on Knapp not getting a contract. So that's 2 to 3 spots there. And if a guy's not with the team now, you could probably get them on low enough money to fill those supplemental spots. So, I could see us signing two trialists, but they're not going to be like Mackenzie Gaines was like the only striker on the team when we signed him. So
yeah.
It's going to be like the last spots on the roster and not like, oh my God, somebody who can play up top, please sign with us.
We got to bring him in and start him immediately. We did finally get a signing. You want to talk about Johan Valencia? Again, I don't know what we have to add to it other than where he fits in the midfield. But do you have any other notes you wanted to cover on him?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered enough on it. I think the more interesting conversation is like, where's he going to fit? I guess we can cover kind of the terms of it. So it's a 3-year contract with a 1-year option. Is that what it ended up being?
Right. The option's for 2025. So yeah, it would be a 1-year option.
And then he is going to occupy an international slot, which we do have now because of Pochettino leaving. Based on reports and rumors that we've read, it looks like the fee was somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million. He is not in the country yet. I would imagine that's because they're working on a visa. They didn't finish all the paperwork and stuff until last week. We saw how long it took for Gite to get in the country. Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but I imagine that's the holdup there. As far as what the midfield will look like, I think I had the hope that he would be more of a 6 and they would play him more of a 6 after seeing some video on him. And in the press release, there's a quote from Claudio Reyna saying, Johan is a young, talented midfielder with great defensive instincts and an eye for the ball. His presence will add a new dimension to our midfield and free up some of our more attack-minded players to get forward and create chances. So it sounds like to me that they are setting up the idea that he's going to be defensive, Alex Ring's going to be an 8. Is that what you took from that?
Yeah, that's what I took from that, and then I went back and read Chris Bill's the 2 articles he wrote from his interview with Ring, too. And Ring talked about enjoying playing high and connecting with Driussi, them having a good understanding on and off the field. And you can see that when we were playing together higher, that they were better. And then I think in the second article, too, he talked about Ring's strong preference for playing the 8 and playing further forward. And so those 2 things really seem to fit together in a way that is hopefully leads to what did you say last week? Like when Alex Ring is angry. Oh no, that was in the Stateside Soccer Show. I think we said like Alex Ring maybe sometimes gets angry, makes dumb decisions. So maybe he will be playing who he wants to be, and he will be happy. And Valencia will be sort of a destroyer at the 6 that makes the midfield the best that it can be.
Yeah. So do you think is it foolish to not play Alex Ring as a 6 as good as he has been in that spot?
Well, I think given the roster we have right now, I don't see how we do that unless you're going to play.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like as far as like going and buying a 6 as opposed to going and buying an 8.
Yeah, I think it's maybe easier to go and buy a 6, and I think you have to buy the best player available for your situation.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, Ring looked pretty good as an 8. I mean, he looked like our best 8. Now, yeah, if you had like him as a 6 and a killer 8 in a perfect world, maybe that would be better off. But I think you can only deal with the situation that you have sort of in front of you. And I think that Valencia, I mean, we kind of had somebody who was maybe an 8 last year that was kind of risky that we just sent back to Argentina. So like that didn't work out very well. So I can see where this is the best move that we have. Where do you think this leaves Danny Pereira? Is he our backup at both spots, or what's the rest of the midfield look
like? I don't know. I don't know if Wolf is still going to be like have his campaign to make Danny a 6. Because he's not like he did well distributing from there, but I think he's not like his game awareness isn't quite good enough to like do really well distributing from that spot. And then B, his defensive work was nowhere near good enough to be playing in that spot. So my preference would be Danny to be like the backup, like the first in at the 8. And if there's a situation where, say, Valencia is not available, I would prefer to play Ring at the 6 and Danny at the 8.
Where do you put Segura in that situation?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Segura. He played more wing at DC, but I've heard and read a lot of people saying that he has played quite a bit of central midfield. So I think he could probably play that 8 spot as well. I've also heard people say they expect him. I don't know how informed this opinion is, but they expect him to be able to play the 6. From what I've seen of him, I don't think he's a 6. I don't know that he's got that defensive bite in him to be really effective there. So my guess would be like the 8, like dual 10 thing if it's a 4-3-3, or a right winger, which we have 15 right wingers on the team.
That's a real position of need. So you really think when Valencia's can't go or whatever, like we see Ring, our best position would be to see Ring drop back.
That would be my preference.
Have either Segura or Danny at the 8.
I think so. But the thing is, so once Driussi came into the team, we still did see 4-3-3 sometimes, but more often than not, it was more like a 4-2-3-1 with 2 slightly deeper midfielders and one getting a bit more forward. I think especially with Valencia and Ring in that setup, I mean, like Ring still ended up bailing people out and like hustling back and making last minute tackles a lot, even when he was playing more forward. And so having that ability, like when he needs to do that, we have a guy who can, but also someone behind him like Valencia who makes it so that Ring doesn't have to do that all the time. I think Andrew Urban was asking on Twitter the other day, like, does this mean, asking about Pereira, like, is Pereira on the bench? Like, does this guy really put Pereira on the bench? And I said, yeah, but that's a good thing. Like, a guy like Danny Pereira coming off the bench is good. Good teams have good subs. And so if Danny Pereira is a starter on this team, it's no slight to Danny, me saying this, but like, I don't think we're a great team if Danny Pereira is starting right now. 2 years from now, sure, I think that would be true. But right now, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and that's something you've said before, that's the best thing out of this offseason is that there's some amount of talent and some level of people who can actually make a difference coming off the bench.
Yeah, just guys who have played in MLS before coming off the bench and like have been moderately to substantially successful in MLS coming off the bench, which is not a thing we had in almost any position last year.
Yeah, that is very true. So that's off season. We'll talk a lot more about this next week, but this is all going to come down to what we do at center back. So let's talk about the preseason schedule now. So we found out that it started yesterday. No, it started today, right? Is that right?
I saw a press thing saying that it was going to start on Sunday, but we didn't see any photos or anything until today, Monday. So they may have had some meetings or something yesterday, but the first footage or photos we got from the training pitch were today on Monday.
And our confusion is because we still have seen basically nothing official about anything on the preseason. So what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes are like things we've cobbled together from Twitter stories and Slack and
other teams' press releases.
Other teams' press releases, yeah, whatever we can find. So I think the one thing I want to start off with is there was a question about who on the team spends the most time on their hair that Andrew Urban asked in reply to Derek Ensign. And so do you have an opinion on who you think takes the longest to get ready every day before they head out?
I thought after looking at the roster, this was going to be easy, but I think at a certain point last season, it would have been Cecilio. But this year, like, there's really not a lot of complicated hairstyles going on. The guys who seem like they've spent at least put a lot of product in it, are just doing like a comb straight through, it seems like. So Husin, Stuver, Kolmanich, Driussi, they don't seem like they're doing a ton to it, although it is very product filled, it seems.
So nobody has to elaborate. So you're going to punt on the deal, or what are you?
I think I'm going to go for Jean Kolmanich.
Really?
Yeah, because he's the only one who seems to have like a very like fixed hairstyle that's not just like straight slicked back.
Okay, I can go with that.
Do you have any others?
I mean, I feel like with the way that Julio spends so much time putting himself together in general, and how just like manicured his look is, probably even though he probably doesn't need to spend that much time on it, I feel like Julio spends the time to make sure that every single hair is exactly where it needs to be.
That's a good sleeper pick. I thought of that one too, because he's got the curls, right? And so you might assume he doesn't have to spend that much time on it, but he might still spend time on it. just
to make sure it's exactly right. Yeah. He's an awesome Instagram follow too. If you don't, and everybody should.
There's lots of like in off season, good vacation footage, good baby footage there. It's high quality and some good fashion stuff. Highly recommended.
It is. So we think in a couple weeks Austin's going to go to Florida. We seem to hear from various places, some teams officially, Austin not officially at all, but through the rumor mill, that there's going to be at least a decent sized contingent of MLS teams going to Florida and training. Is it Orlando? I guess it's where they play the MLS's back, or is it IMG
Academy in Bradenton, which I don't actually know where Bradenton, Florida is.
Okay, I don't either. I think it's somewhere near Miami, but it's in the boot. It's in the peninsula part of Florida, as all of Florida is. And we think they're probably going to play maybe one or more preseason games while they're there.
Yeah, I would imagine so. If there's going to be a bunch of other MLS teams there, you would guess they would play some like closed door scrimmages there at the very least.
Yep. And then on February 16th, we have an actual game that is officially announced, the only one that we have so far, and that is Austin's going to play the Atlas, the champions of Liga MX, at Q2 Stadium for a preseason friendly. If you're a season ticket holder, it's included with your package, and it's already in there on SeatGeek. So I mean, that's cool. I think everybody's excited about getting back into the stadium earlier than we thought we were going to, and then to get a team of that caliber, I think will be exciting.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I always thought it was a little bit weird that the Tigres game happened in the middle of the season last year, but I guess without any other like tournaments going on, like you could do it then. And they like both teams played a bunch of reserve players, and like Owen Wolf got a bunch of minutes, and Mackenzie Gaines made his debut, didn't even have a contract yet. So I imagine Atlas will send somewhat of a B team to that game and maybe bring a couple of stars for marketing purposes. But just like hype alone, like that's a really cool thing to see the Mexican champs come to Austin.
That will be cool. And then we have on February 19th, a preseason friendly against Chicago Fire at St. David's Performance Center.
Did we find this out through like a press release from the team or something?
Yeah, we did find out this from a press release from a team, that being the Chicago Fire. So the Chicago Fire announced that they're going to travel to Texas starting on February 6th. They will play 3 games against MLS opponents. And I believe that they're all at St. David's Performance Center. So Chicago will play Toronto on the 12th of February, FC Dallas on the 16th, and then they will close out their preseason against Austin FC on February 19th at noon at St. David's Performance Center. So we believe that to mean that Austin will also be playing against Chicago, or they will be surprised when Chicago shows up.
So how many of these do you think we'll actually get to watch via some kind of stream?
I would think that the Chicago one at St. David's we will. I think the Atlas one we will. I don't think anything that happens in Florida we'll get to watch. But I mean, it's just a guess. I have no idea. Does that sound right to you?
That makes sense to me. Like you don't want to necessarily be streaming like the second week on the job playing against players. Like I imagine those will look more like scrimmages and less like games, like a more controlled setting. Maybe those later ones though, because they did do some streaming from St. David's last season, even like right after it opened pretty much. And so they, at least we know that they have the technology and the infrastructure to stream it if they want to or are allowed to. So I would hope we at least get to see 1 or 2 of those preseason ones. And then maybe the rest of them will get the little like 30-second highlight packages like we did last year.
Yeah, I mean, I would love every Austin FC moment I can get, but I feel like last preseason, there were all these things I learned that I did that weren't like Danny Houston scored a bunch of goals and Roddy scored goals, and like I mean, it was just such a not applicable to the regular season thing that like if I don't get to see those preseason games, it's not going to kill me either.
Yeah, we're just like so thirsty.
Pochettino
for it all,
knocking
right?
down bangers, and whatever. And we thought he was going to be so like it's fine if we don't get to see it, I'm okay.
We're just like starving for any glimpse of the team at that point. And so like I remember I like put together like a lineup essentially based on like this like field level highlight footage. Was like, so there was a moment where Cecilio was in the middle of the field, and then I saw John Gallagher over on the left wing, so I think he might be playing there. So there's just like dumb stuff like that we were obsessing over. And I think this time was like, okay, we've seen these guys. We'll be like very interested to see some of the new guys or like maybe some of these trialists, but maybe we'll have like a little less anxiety or enthusiasm about these games this year.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's see, what else do we need to cover? We got Micah Burton with a call up to the national team. Was it U17?
U17 again, yeah. So again, like we talked about this last time, but essentially it is a U17 camp, but it looks like they're only calling in who would essentially be like U16 players at this point, because they're preparing for the U17 World Cup, which is like in the next age cycle. So they're only calling in players who would be eligible at that point in time. So this is just a camp. I don't think they're playing any games, but it's like a 30 man roster they called in. I think one thing to take away from this is that Micah Burton got called in late last year to one of these camps. The fact that he got called back is a great sign, because that was his first time in. I think maybe he had done some stuff at the lower levels even, but U17 is where it starts to get serious, right? And the fact that he got called back is really encouraging, that they liked what they saw, at least enough to call him back and get another look at him.
Yeah, my question to you, as someone who's seen Micah Burton more than most people, is: do you think is he the Owen Wolf of this year? And we get 8 minutes in 2 games out of him. I think he's going to be on the senior club.
Well, in my long and tenured career as a youth soccer prospect or youth soccer scout, I've been watching the Austin FC Academy for like a year and a half, so I'm not super confident in my ability to predict how well youth players are going to do. But I'm not entirely convinced Micah Burton is ready for first team minutes this year. He's still like, he's gotten bigger over the last 2 years, but he still kind of looks like a kid. And so,
well, because he is a kid.
Yeah, he is 16. So my prediction is Micah Burton gets a homegrown contract this calendar year. And maybe he gets some minutes towards the end of the season, or like in like US Open Cup or something like that, if we have some late run in that. but I don't know that we should expect a lot of minutes, because one thing to keep in mind is U17 is still a long way from that first team national team. There's lots and lots of players who've played U17 and never got a sniff of the full national team. And so U17 is not only far from the full national team, but also still a pretty far away from Austin FC's first team. Like the level is still pretty, like the gulf is pretty wide. But I do think he'll get a contract this year, and maybe we'll get a few minutes, but I wouldn't expect him to see real minutes for at least another couple of years.
All right, that's fair. Unless we have these Seattle Sounders 15-year-olds coming down the Austin thing, which is still kind of makes me bitter. But okay, is there anything else we need to talk about before we talk to Sam?
I think we're good. Let's preface this Sam Stejskal interview. So most of you listening to this should know who Sam is, but he writes for The Athletic, also does the Allocation Disorder podcast, but he is one of the top, would you say 2 or 3 writers who writes about MLS in the world? Like,
yeah, he's probably my favorite just at The Athletic. And it's one of those it's really cool that when you DM Sam, he says yes and agrees to come on the show. It's one of those things that still blows me away. Yeah,
it is an honor for him to take the time out of his day, which we almost didn't get that time based on all of the news that was happening late last week in MLS. But we get close to this interview time, and Sam sends me a message, was like, "Hey, can you give me a few minutes? I'm trying to finish this up." I was like, yeah, cool. We'll have the room open. Let us know when you join. And I'm like checking the Athletics homepage, and I see an article posted. I was like, oh, Sam just published an article about Riley McGree getting sold from Charlotte for $7 million or whatever. And then Sam joins the meeting, and he's like, hey, sorry about that. He's like very, very kind and very apologetic. It's like, yeah, I just saw your story post. It's like, actually, there's like bigger stuff going on. Can I have another 20 minutes? Like, yes, absolutely. You're not getting paid to be on our podcast. Do the job that makes you money. And just like, let us know whenever you can do it. And then he came back on, and it was like the Kellen Acosta stuff with him tweeting about like not wanting to go to LA, and Jefferson Soteldo and all this other crazy stuff that was all happening at the same time. And like Sam still took the time out of his day to come and spend 20 minutes with us. So we are extremely grateful to Sam. He's a consummate professional and very, very good at what he does. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with that conversation with Sam about what Austin FC's salary budget might look like for 2022. When no one is around. Moontower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And so I have a confession to make.
What's that, Jeremiah?
Well, last week we talked about the calendar, the dog calendar, and you asked me which dog is my favorite dog. And I have to admit that I had the 2021 calendar and the 2022 calendar sitting on my desk, and I needed to start a fire, and I used the wrong one. So I've already burned my 2022 FVF calendar in my fire pit, so I was not able to answer. But I see that you have yours handy.
All those sweet dogs, Jeremiah.
I know. I have 2021 still, which does me no good.
So I went back and looked, and I'm showing Jeremiah a picture of my October dog, which, do you understand why he's my favorite now?
Yes. Yeah, he looks like an amazing dog.
It's
like a
some
wholesome,
kind of like retriever mutt looking thing, and it's white and fluffy and looks very nice.
Yeah, definitely a star of the calendar, and also helped us make s'mores last week.
Well, if you're not a monster like Jeremiah and burned your FVF calendar, and you would like to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law. Once again, that's fvf.law. All right, we are joined by Sam Stejskal of The Athletic in the Allocation Disorder podcast. Sam, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Pleasure to be here.
So I was looking back at we had you on the show last year, and it was like 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks shy of like right at a year from when we had you on last. And we wanted to talk to you a bit about Tomas Pochettino getting loaned out. And I think when we had you on last time, he had just gotten signed. And so so every time Sam's on our podcast, a move happens with Tomas Pochettino. So the first thing we wanted to jump in and talk about is the Alex Ring deal. So Alex Ring renewed his contract, became a designated player for Austin FC. There's some initial fan confusion and some fan outcry, but we spent a lot of time on last week's show kind of explaining why the U22 initiative kind of makes that third DP spot necessarily be a cheaper guy, and kind of why Alex Ring kind of fit that mold. Do you think making Alex Ring a designated player is the right move for Austin? And just what are your takes on that move in general?
Yeah, well, he doesn't have to be a DP with the U22. You know, Austin could have saved that spot and signed somebody under the age of 23 in the calendar year for 2022. And then he could have counted as a young designated player. And then they still could have had 3 U22 spots open. I know that's a lot of U22, U23 things. So apologies if you don't have it straight. But there's no real better way to explain it. That being said, you know, I don't know exactly what their budget is. They're not the richest ownership group in the league, despite the fact that, you know, they had a lot of success at the gate in year one, and I'm sure they did pretty well from a business perspective. But yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised when that deal got announced myself. I always kind of raise my eyebrows a touch when a guy who is on a contract gets elevated to a DP contract with his existing team. That being said, I don't think anyone would dispute that Ring was, I don't know, you guys followed it closer than me. Was he the best player for Austin last year? He was one of.
Until Driussi came, he was the best player.
So on merit, you know, I don't have any issue with him earning that salary. He was already technically in that kind of range last year. You know, he was a TAM player last year. So in general, I think it's fine for a club like Austin to do something like that. It gives him some added agency, and I'm sure he feels nice and better about himself and his paycheck now than he did, you know, before this contract was signed. And it's never a bad thing to have your captain feeling good like that. So, you know, I think it's a fine move for Austin. Is it like a swing for the fences move? No, it's not. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good decision or a good transaction.
So do you think we'll see more of this kind of move from clubs to take advantage of it? Or do you think it's only a specific kind of club, like it's Austin? Do you like LAFC or Toronto or like somebody that's got like big?
Yeah. So like some teams prioritize these U22 spots, right? And they want to have 3 available. So LAFC, who you just mentioned, definitely a club that spends a lot of money and big market and all of those things. They prioritize having 3 U22 spots. So their 3 DPs are not going to be all senior, non-tammable guys. Toronto, on the other hand, you know, they're signing Lorenzo Insigne for $1 billion, and they have Alejandro Bosuelo, and they have Carlos Salcedo pretty soon, most likely. And those are all overage, so 24 or older designated players who make more than the TAM threshold, which is $1.6 million. So they only get 1 U22. So it's just a club by club thing, you know, and it's personal preferences for that specific organization. I think for teams that really want to be active in selling players, they'll continue to prioritize those U22 spots.
So Chris Bills wrote for The Striker last week, kind of making the same point that you did, that I think the alternative to having someone like Ring as that DP would be, there's a report of Austin FC talking to a Finnish center back named Leo Väisänen, and the final report was that they didn't offer enough money to him. And so do you think it would have been better for Austin, or a more ambitious move, to throw a bag at a guy like Väisänen and bring in another higher caliber player to be that third DP spot and leave Ring as a TAM player?
I mean, it's hard to say specifically for that player because not only have I never seen him play, but I've never heard his name until you just mentioned it right there. So I can't speak with any degree of specificity about him. But yeah, of course, it would have been more ambitious had they gone out and signed like some $10 million player in that spot.
But right? They wouldn't have been able to, right?
No, they would have if he was young.
If he was young, right? Okay.
Is anybody doing that? Are there young DPs?
Yeah. Atlanta did it last year. Barco was a young DP. So, you know, they were able to go and sign 3 U22 players, despite the fact that all 3 of their DPs were well over the TAM threshold, because Barco was a young. So yeah, they're one team. LAFC was another, with Brian Rodriguez. I'm trying to think if there's any others off the top of my head. I'm sure there are some more. NYCFC, I think, as well. They might not. No, they didn't even have 3 designated players last year. One of them was a young DP though, and they did have 3 U22 guys. So
that's Magno would be the young.
Yeah, Tallis Magno.
Okay,
right. Yeah.
So another move that Austin made recently is loaning Tomas Pochettino back to River Plate. What does a move like this mean for Austin's salary budget in 2022? I know that there's an option to sell after the season, but what does Austin get salary budget wise this season?
Yeah, so obviously they get the DP spot, right? That has been filled by Ring. And then the rest of it sort of depends on if there is a loan fee. Well, presumably there is. That's why there's a DP spot available. But how much that loan fee is, his salary, how much of it is being covered by River and how much is being covered by Austin. I don't know the particulars there. But let's say they cover the entire salary, River does, and Austin doesn't have to pay a penny of it. Then all of that would come off the books, right? And I unfortunately do not know the particulars of the loan fee, or this is something that I need to look into, how that works in terms of budget charges and things like that. I don't think it would apply if they got a fee for him, but
yeah, I was curious
can't say
about
it with certainty.
So generally a transfer fee. So the transfer fee that Austin paid for Pochettino would normally be calculated into I guess not if he's a DP though, right? So
no, well,
it would normally be calculated into the budget charge, but if he's a DP, it doesn't. So maybe that part doesn't matter.
It sort of does, and it sort of doesn't, and it's all a little confusing. There's a charge, right, or an equivalent of what it would be, and then that gets bumped down to 612 or whatever if they spend allocation, maybe a little less. It's complicated, and without knowing the exact specifics of what the fee was, both for acquisition and for the loan, it's really hard to say with any degree of specificity.
This is so hard.
So sorry, it's a crappy answer. But
that's what everybody asks us all the time, right? Like, exactly what does this mean? And it's like, nobody knows.
They have some more room.
There you go.
Because of it.
That's a good way to. So let's say we get to the end. Let's say he has a great year in Argentina. We get to the end of the year. They decide to convert that to a purchase, and they say $3.5 million. It's again a made up number that nobody really knows, that we've heard.
Sure.
So what happens with that money? I mean, Austin obviously gets to put that money in the bank, but then in terms of how we're able, how the club's able to reallocate it, like what does that look like?
Yeah, it depends. Again, everything depends. So when designated players that teams have to go out of their own pocket to pay for, so they're over the maximum budget charge of 612. Pochettino is, right? You first have to recoup the entirety that you paid the guy out of pocket, acquisition fee and salary, before you can convert any of the transfer fee into general allocation money. Once you get to that point, you can convert up to $1,050,000 of the transfer fee into general allocation money, which then you can spend on your roster however you choose, or you can trade, do whatever. It's just another asset for you to use. An interesting thing there, well, general allocation money is like, it's not real money. Like, it's just like, it's monopoly money that's given to teams by the league. But in these instances, when it comes out of a transfer fee, the team actually has to pay the league real money, not monopoly money, to convert. So if for instance, Charlotte sold a player for $4 million today, they get the $4 million wired to them from Middlesbrough, who was the buying club. But if they want to convert $1,050,000 of that into GAM, they need to wire $1,050,000 of it to MLS.
Essentially cashing in for like GAM poker chips.
Exactly. It's a good way to put it. Might steal that.
Oh, so like a worst case scenario in this Pochettino situation, if he plays poorly in Argentina and has to come back to Austin, then essentially Austin has 4 DPs and they would need to buy down Pochettino at that point, correct?
Or Ring. Ring can be bought down as well.
Yeah,
His contract is still tameable, but yes. one of them would need to be bought down, or Dominguez or Drusi could move as well. That's a possibility too. So
yeah, and even with Dominguez's salary is like 1.6 or something like that. So I think he would actually even be below. I don't remember exactly what his salary is, but I think he would be in the TAM range as well, depending on what.
Unlikely when you account for his transfer
for the transfer fee. It's always going to keep it over.
I don't know the exact specifics there, but it would likely keep it over for the duration of his deal. I'm actually pulling up his salary right now. It was 1.74.
Oh, so it's
so he's above any.
Yeah.
Just had that open. That spreadsheet open, coincidentally.
So Claudio Reyna, the Austin FC's sporting director, he had a decent run at NYCFC, put together some decent teams there. Here so far, he's had some hits and had some misses. And I've seen some people online kind of question his acumen as a sporting director and saying that his success in New York was mostly due to them being part of City Football Group. How much stock do you put into that theory, and just how do you rate Reyna in general as a sporting director?
Sure. So I'll preface all of this by saying that it's impossible for any of us to know how good or how involved or which player was pushed for by which person in each specific front office, and which player was, I don't know about that, but I'll let you have this one, right? So we don't know, right? All we can judge is the results. They got good results at NYCFC. Do they have some advantages because they're a part of City Football Group? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's fair to say. Do those advantages exist at Austin FC? No, they don't. They're not a part of a massive global scouting network. They don't have all the data and the resources and the institutional knowledge that Manchester City has in its network of a dozen or so clubs all around the world. That's no shade to Austin FC. This is like the preeminent football organization in the sport, and so you're able to tap into that at NYCFC in a way that you're not when you're at Austin. So the job becomes a little bit more difficult in some ways. I think that they made some pretty fairly obvious mistakes last year, particularly at the beginning of the season and entering the year with Danny Houston as your striker. That was one that, a lot of people, myself included, were kind of raising an eyebrow at the time. And, it's hard. It's easy to play the results after the fact, but that was one that people were kind of curious about from the get-go. So that's one that I would point to. The center backs, I would say a little less so, as at the time being a concern, but they were something of a concern. Maybe not as much as striker. And again, that was a position that hurt Austin last year. That being said, I think Austin is due to make a decent jump this season, because I think they were better than what their record showed. And I think the underlying numbers kind of reflected that. I think Driussi is really good. He showed that in MLS in his brief time in the league. I think Musa Jite is interesting. He's not super polished, but he's got some ability there. And if he can kind of fit in, then, he should be better than what Danny Houston and Aaron Schoenfeld were able to provide last season, which, how many games did they combine to play? Like 6, something like that? They were both injured for most of the year.
Houston played 5, I believe, and Schoenfeld never suited up.
So there you go, 5, right? So that's an issue. And so if those guys can be better, and if they can be better along the back line, which I'm blanking right now. Today has been an absolute
Cascante and Romagna are the center backs now, and Reyna has said that they are in the market for another starting level center back right now.
They still need to add that, right?
Yeah, and I think it all hinges on that center back move. The whole season probably hinges on that.
Right. And, they have some time, right? The season is 6 weeks away, so that's not very much time. But the primary transfer window doesn't close for a while, right? And, Austin played some good soccer last year, and I would expect more of that stylistically this year. And I would expect better results and a decent jump as well, especially if they get that center back across the line.
Yeah, I think one other mistake that Austin fans would point out would be the expansion draft. I think we ended up having one of those guys play any real minutes for us, and one of the guys we picked was Kamal Miller and traded him for, I think, $250K in GAM, pretty much.
Yeah,
and he ended up being a Canadian national team player.
Yeah, no, and he's done well. And at the time, though, that was one that, like maybe it seemed a little bit low, but it wasn't a thing that people were like up in arms about, right? And so that's one where it's like, you know, the process instead of the result. I think that's important to keep in mind. The Joe Corona one was bad, very, very bad. And that one's on Reyna and the entire staff there. I'm sure they don't feel good about that entire transaction. If they listen to this podcast, I'm sure they're cringing to themselves right now. So yeah, that one was bad. But you look around the expansion draft, a lot of teams don't do super well with it. So it's not that rare of a thing. There aren't a ton of good players available in it most of the time, by design. And, you know, like Charlotte this year, for instance, they got more money back for a couple of guys that they traded, but they traded basically the two best players that they selected. So, you know, it's interesting. I'm not going to crush them for not having a great expansion draft. I guess what I'm trying to say, even though I think to your point, they didn't have a great one.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, you know, the offseason. We've made a couple signings from within the league, right? We made Maxi Urruti and Ethan Finley. How much do you value just getting MLS guys who are what do we call Ethan Finley? Like just an MLS minute eating kind of guy, like.
Oh yeah, the Matt Doyle's what he calls minute eaters.
Minute eaters. I think Ethan Finley is a decent pickup. You know, he's a guy that can do a job for you. Maxi Urruti, I'm not a huge fan. That being said, we don't know what his contract is. And he, if I'm remembering correctly, had a decent season last year for Houston. He scored a decent number of goals.
7 goals, I think.
Yeah. So if he's your starting number 9, that's a problem. If you're paying him over $1 million, like he was making last year, that's a problem. I would assume that he's not making that nearly as much money this year. And I would assume that the plan is for him to back up Moussa Djite. So as a number 9 on a decent number, yeah, I like Maxi Urruti. And Ethan Finlay, again, is an option on the wing. Not a locked in starter maybe, but a guy who's going to compete and add depth and spot start for you most likely. Yeah, I think that's a good signing too and a solid pickup.
Yeah, my hopes for both of those guys are kind of a change of pace when needed, because probably we're thinking right now the starting right winger is going to be Diego Fagundes, a very different player than Ethan Finley. And if we ever in a situation where we need to play in transition a bit more or stretch a line, Finley and Urruti are guys who can come off the bench and do that for you in a pinch. And then if nothing else, I'm hoping Urruti will just push Djite to just to have some competition, to know that, okay, you have to work or there's a guy behind you who's going to start in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he can do that for sure. And I think your point about is spot on about kind of offering a different kind of option than what's already on the roster.
All right. Well, Jeremiah, do you have any other questions?
Appreciate you sharing some thoughts and some time with us. And I guess if we have Pochettino news at the end of next season, we'll be sure to have you back.
Set a yearly date, right?
Any other Austin FC thoughts, Sam?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's been relatively quiet for the most part this offseason for them. That wasn't entirely unexpected. They do need to get a center back done. But, you know, I think it's fair for fans to expect a real jump from year 1 to year 2, as long as they, get that improved center back play and then just kind of like regress to the mean a little bit in the attack.
I guess one more question about a center back. So we are looking through free agents, and I don't think there's any free agent center backs right now that would be the difference maker that Austin needs right now. So we were looking through guys who might fit like the model for a trade, and that's a little bit slim pickings too. Again, we don't know what contracts look like and all, but Alexander Cayens is one that I really liked. If I don't know that New York would be willing to get rid of him, but he seemed to kind of fit the mold of like maybe in the last year of his contract and maybe be able to afford him if we were to trade for him like that. Is there anybody you can think of that would be kind of fit the mold for that kind of Alex Ring trade like we made last season?
Ooh, it's a little late in the game for one of those right now. Center backs are notoriously difficult to find, particularly left-footed center backs for any team around the world, not just in MLS. I don't see Cayens being an option for Austin. I don't think NYCFC would want to part with him in any way, shape, or form, especially coming after, a championship season for them. So off the top of my head, man, you put me on the spot here, and I have nothing for you. I apologize. My brain
No
is
worries.
it's shot. Um, it's been a day,
We
but
did have time to think about it and still came up with nothing. So.
I'm sure there are a few out there, but they would probably be unproven or kind of, proven not super starting caliber. Or if you're going to trade for one, it would cost a ton of money. And as I'm sure you guys know, expansion teams, they get extra money in year one, and a lot of that trickles over into year two, but it's less. And so they might not have the room to spare to swing a 7-figure trade. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
All right. Well, Sam, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it as always. And yeah, have a good day.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.
I ain't got no time to let you pass. I only got one life, and it's gone too fast.
All right. We would like to thank Sam Stejskal one more time for taking the time out of his very busy day last week to spend some time with us. So I wanted to maybe react to that a little bit, mainly on ideas about what we could have or should have done with that third designated player spot. It seems like Sam and Chris Bills had slightly different ideas about what we could do. So Sam said we should, and this is a thing that I honestly hadn't even really given that much thought to, but like spending a lot of money on a young DP, which is something you can do. And Chris Bills seemed to be more of the idea of like spending on someone like Leo Väisänen, like a position of need, and you can still pay Alex Ring with TAM and then bring someone in that you can actually spend this transfer fee on, and it doesn't count towards their salary budget charge. Do you, like, after hearing that, does it change your ideas on what we should do, or like make you think differently about any of that?
Well, I think when Sam talked about it, I know he talked about Atlanta having one, and I think is it LAFC was the other club?
Oh yeah, Brian Rodriguez at LAFC and Ezequiel Barco at Atlanta, who I think they're selling him now, but they did have him this last season as a young DP.
So I mean, those are clubs that have no fear of spending money and no salary budget, and I think I think Austin's a very different club, and I feel like it's a really risky move to do that, especially when you have known holes in the roster, to throw a whole bunch of money at a young international prospect that might or might not pan out.
Yeah, and you mentioned holes in the roster. I agree with Sam that spending 10 million on a young DP is the objectively more ambitious thing to do. But like looking at Austin's roster right now and just thinking about like how many roster spots we have and what kind of roster spots those are, I don't think a $10 million 22-year-old fixes our problems right now. We need a 27-year-old center back, like a grizzled veteran essentially, to come in and take charge. And like, even if we were spending $10 million on a 22-year-old, I don't know that it fixes that problem. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair. I mean, I just think that's not the right move right now for where Austin FC is, and maybe at some point in the future when we're a different club and have different construction, maybe it makes sense. But I don't think that's where we are, and so I think that the kind of move. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with Chris's call either, because I mean DP center back seemed to be sort of a very rare thing. So I mean, I feel like what we did with the Ring was the thing to do. What do you think?
I think the real like assessment can be made once we do sign that center back. And Claudio has said that like we are looking for a starting level caliber center back, right? So this isn't speculation. They are trying to sign a starting level center back. I think once we sign that player, we can make a more fair assessment and say like, okay, well maybe they should have thrown a bag at a guy like Väisänen, or like a bigger name that you can't get with TAM, and kept Ring on a TAM contract, because we probably still could have him on a TAM contract. But if we sign a TAM center back that comes in and bosses it, or looks like he at least could be that kind of player, then I think the Ring DP spot's fine. But yeah, time will tell. All right. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And then if you want to continue the conversation, come find us on Twitter at elviajero87 and at jbentley_ATX. And then the Moon Tower Soccer account is on Instagram and Twitter, both at Moon Tower Soccer. And then we'd also encourage you to visit the Striker Texas website. Jeremiah, what can folks look forward to there this week?
Well, Chris Bills put out a pretty good article about called Monopoly Money, about what is TAM and GAM, that really walks through those two mechanisms and what they are and what they aren't. And I know we heard that a little bit, the conversation with Sam just about what those mean, how they're not actual money. So Chris does a pretty good job of breaking it down. And then also, I don't think we've ever talked about her, but, JoJo, who's the editor of the Striker Texas, ran a half marathon in Houston and averaged a 6-minute mile for 13 miles this week. And I'm pretty sure not pretty sure, I'm 100% sure I cannot run a single 6-minute mile without dying. So fastest editor in the business, Johanna Greschel.
That's amazing. I think I got close to a 6-minute mile in high school when I was like in the best shape of my life. And I still am not sure that I actually got there. But running 20, how much is a marathon? 26 miles?
It was a half. Oh,
so
half 13. 13 consecutive 6-minute miles.
Yeah. No, that's not happening. That's not, I don't believe that's even real. All right. Yeah. Congratulations, JoJo. I am very impressed with everything that you do, both running and editing wise. So thank you for all that you do. All right. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer. I think we're going to have our friend Chris Wilhausen on, and we'll go through the depth chart and kind of compare it to where we were at this point last year. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Muchas gracias. Bye bye.